and welcome to our checkout say, where the stay trade thought finds out another conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He is a best-selling author and the author of the book Hush, none other than Mr. Md Selig.
How's it going, Daniel? Great to be here.
Busy, busy always, Mr. Andy. And can you please introduce more about yourself? That tightness.
Sure. So I kind of come out of a historical background with a degree in history from the University of Arkansas, and then basically became a attack pilot in the Marines and was a participant in Operation Desert Storm back in 1991. And from that, I was also the intelligence officer for my squadron. So I was studying top secret briefs during that conflict, as well as kind of watching CNN. So the new novel Hush is basically something that came out of all my interests, that nothing was making sense from what I was doing in the war compared to what CNN was saying I was doing in the war compared to what the top secret briefs were saying that I was doing. I could just tell that somebody else was driving the whole thing, and it didn't appear to be the American government or any particular government. It seemed above all that. So that's where Hush came from. It's kind of your covert history from 1940 forward, and hopefully fun for your readers and your listeners.
Definitely. Yes, for sure. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Andy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, what are your struggle in writing Hush?
So writing Hush for me is first with story, and then I just do an insane amount of research whenever I'm writing about covert history. If you follow the story and you're enjoying the story, you can also find that as you're reading the story, if you're reading about Roswell, for instance, or any other covert event like Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 1941, that they're pretty excessively researched. So it might be fun for your listeners to understand that it's not absolute fiction, that it's really based heavily on the real events that occurred.
The real events. Oh my goodness, so intriguing, Mr. Amdi. And the title House is so powerful and open to interpretation. What is the central meaning of House in the context of your book? And is it an internal state, external force, or societal critic?
So that's a great question, Daniel. And I would say it's a little bit of all three. Hush is basically what you're told when you witness a covert event anytime in our history that elements even above the governments of all countries will enforce, to the point that if you don't stay quiet about what you've seen regarding alien technologies or alien ships or alien interactions, you can easily disappear. So that's where the title comes from.
What was the catalytic moment or the growing conviction that made feel this book hard to be written?
Yeah, so I think the impetus for writing Hush was that I always felt like I had been manipulated, because I was a skeptic to begin with Roswell and alien interactions and all the things with alien relations. I always thought, well, none of that's true. And it wasn't until I was writing for film and television in LA after I got out of the military that I started to study more into the alien presence and started to realize, oh my goodness, I think some of these events actually occurred. And then further research over the next few years, there was just volumes of information where I realized, okay, there's an actual story here, an actual history it has been clearly covered up, and I have been manipulated into believing that there was no such history. But I'm now realizing, all right, I need to write about this so other people can understand that there might be another reality that's their actual reality. So that's what you get to read about if you decide to read Hush.
Interesting, Mr. MD. Hush often implies silence, but not all silence is empty. How does your book explore the difference between stifling or oppressive silence or peaceful generative one?
Okay. So I'll try to make that a concise answer in the sense of the silence that is asked for by operatives when you've seen an alien event, let's say at Roswell, if you've seen a crash landing. The amount of information about witnesses who saw crashed alien ships and how harshly they were basically assaulted by military operatives saying, if you say a word about this, you'll disappear or your family members will disappear. And those threats were so powerful in 1947 that many of those witnesses, who were just kids at the time, kept that secret for the rest of their lives. Some of them finally on their deathbed saying, well, I actually did see an alien ship and I saw a live alien and several dead aliens, and this was my experience, and I'm just telling it now on my deathbed because I've got nothing to lose, but I want everyone to know that that's what I've been holding all these years when people wanted to know why I was so silent about Roswell. So there's enough of those documented stories out there where if you do the research, you realize, oh my goodness, an entire evolution took place. And so from the silence standpoint, those folks, that's what I call a forced silence. And if they didn't adhere to it, they could, what I call death by suicide. They could roll off a bridge in their car, or they could hang themselves or be shot in the head by their own hand. But it was all what we call death by suicide, where it was actually operatives murdering these witnesses and then making it look like a suicide.
And in a world that often rewards loudness and constant communication, Mr. MD, why is it hushing? Is it a necessary act for personal or collective well being?
Right. So, once again, if you're told to keep your mouth shut about something you've seen that authorities are talking to you about, you're really taking a risk when you do speak out if they've gone to the lengths of actually confronting you. And the collective silence, I think, has more to do with a lot of folks were like me, just skeptical, where they don't talk about aliens because they've been thoroughly brainwashed, like me, to believe that aliens don't exist, et cetera, et cetera. So there's your two types of silence. One is a forced, and one is just from not having knowledge of any alien related events.
On the themes of message, Mr. MD, what are the key noises, internal or external, that you believe we most need to learn to hush in order to live more fully?
So are you asking, given that we know the state of affairs, or are you saying given that we don't know the state of affairs, Daniel? In other words, can you just rephrase your question a little bit so I can answer more concisely for you?
Yes, so what are the key noises, just like Roswell, that you believe we must need to learn to hush in
Sure.
order to live independently?
Right. So I think the keys about your covert history are that if you understand that Roswell occurred and you think of the implications that flowed out from Roswell, for instance, we recovered three alien crafts that had crash landed from two separate alien races. And just the technologies of those craft, which were eventually reverse engineered, created what we have now, which is a TR-3B, which is a anti-gravity ship that Lockheed Martin developed only 10 to 15 years after Roswell. They had created the first one, and it flies daily out of McCord and out of Station D, which is Area 51, going to the Lunar Operations Command and back. And all of the technologies that have come forward from just the Roswell events. That doesn't include all the other crashed events where we've recovered crash saucers like Cape Girardeau in 1941, like Saipan in 1940, like after the Battle of LA, we recovered two more ships, one in San Bernardino and one off the coast of California. When you put all that together, you suddenly have a massive change to your own history where you realize, okay, there's a whole thing going on here where our country or someone is reverse engineering these ships, and it might not even be our government. In my opinion, it's above our government. It's above all governments, with the group that leads this, what I'll just call a manipulation of worldwide events. And what you see in the press and all of the stuff about congressional hearings, most of that is just what they want you to spin on. It has really nothing to do with what's actually happening around you.
Mr. MD, the act of telling someone hush can be the act of control. How does your
Mhm.
book address the tension between seeking a personal quiet and being silenced by others or society?
Okay. So I think for those who are interested in going inside and figuring out who they are and your actual power as a human, to me, that's kind of your greatest power. What the book talks about is where outside forces have told you to be quiet. And the difference is obviously your choice to be silent on your own and see what you really are. And then opposite to that would be someone essentially confronting you and saying, stay quiet or you can disappear.
Definitely. And on the personal journey and writing process, Mr. MD, writing a book called Has suggests a deep personal journey with this concept. How did the process of writing this book change your own relationship with noise, silence, and your own voice?
That's a great question. So I have a daily practice that I do, which I get up in the morning and I make sure that there's no technology turned on. I fix a small breakfast and then I do what I call a sit or a meditation. And I tell myself I'm only going to sit for 5 minutes, but often that can become an hour or more where I'm just allowing my heart to kind of come forward and get out of my head. And I can say that when I wrote the book, hush for me with writing the book had to do with a little bit of both, with telling the story of our covert past and how people were told to be quiet, but also you'll find the characters in the book have their own agenda for getting quiet because of all that's going on around them. It gets a little wild in the book, and they have to also sit down and get quiet to figure out where their foundation is, because it gets so chaotic in the book. So I think you'll find a nice mix of both.
Was there a chapter or section that was surprisingly difficult to write? Perhaps because it required you to sit in a discomforting silence or confront the truth you had been quieting.
That's a great question. I haven't heard that question, Daniel. I would say that there was actually a couple of chapters that were difficult to write because of the subject matter. One of the alien traded technologies in Hush
Hmm.
deals with the disappearance of MH370. And if you get the audible version, you'll actually get to hear the actual radio calls of the flight and how they went from an Asian voice before takeoff to an American voice right after takeoff. and you'll get to read about my version of what occurred with that jet being hijacked by the American CIA and taken to where it was safely landed at Diego Garcia. I won't tell you much more about that, but the evolution is pretty tragic for what occurred for those passengers and crew.
Mr. MD, how did you, as the author, practice the principles of HAS during the often chaotic process of creating and publishing a book?
Right. So every day that I'm writing, I get kind of spun in my head because I'm thinking about how to create the mechanisms of story and how to develop a character more. And then at some point, I just get overwhelmed. I quit writing or I get tired. And then I find that if I sit and get quiet and kind of go inside, that all of the details of life kind of settle down and I'm in a content state that also gives me information in a wild way for the next section of writing that I'm going to do the next day. And obviously, the next day in the morning, I'm going to sit again. And in those quiet spaces, I find that it's almost like I'm being whispered to about what's important to write about next. And all I can tell you is sometimes I feel like I'm writing for a committee. That yeah, I do the writing. I don't farm it out to AI or anything like that, but sometimes I feel like I'm being directed
Mhm.
by all I can say is an alien presence that's benevolent or a spiritual presence that's benevolent. Maybe it's love, but you'll get a sense of that in Hush for certain.
Mr. Andy, as an author or as a best selling author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, long term goal is to give people a break from their daily lives by creating writing that is an escape for them, but also fascinating for them, in that it's really researched heavily so that they can rely on events that I'm giving them in the story that are written from a fictional standpoint, but are based in heavy facts about that incident and heavy research into the individuals that participated in those events. So hopefully it'll be entertaining for them.
Yes, good luck to your goals, Mr. Michael. I'm looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be a best-selling author like you?
I would say write often and try to read your favorite authors and figure out what their mechanisms are that make you root for their characters, and then you can do the same thing.
Yes, right and right and right. And stop procrastinating, people. Share your talents to the world, just like Mr. MD. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey, Mr. Michael?
Oh, sure. Steinbeck's East of Eden is one of my favorites.
Yes.
The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Heinlein is a great book. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Heinlein. And I really like, well, there's so many I like, but I would say if you haven't read Cannery Row or Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, they're also amazing. So Steinbeck is always a favorite, more so for me than Hemingway. Steinbeck to me is such a giant. But I also like China Mieville. If you want to go off into the wild world of complete fantasy with characters that are Beatles and everything else that you fully believe are real, then check out China Mieville. I recommend Perdido Street Station is a great novel, as well as The Scar. And that would be enough for you to have 3 months worth of reading right there of just those books.
3 month, people. It's a classic indeed. And thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Andy. So, how does House speak to a concept of finding one's authentic voice. It seems paradoxical. Or does we need a hush the word to finally hear ourselves?
Sure. So I think that's the multi-level of the word itself. Hush is that at the end of the day, you have to be the director of your own focus, your own intent. And I encourage everyone to quit looking out at CNN and at congressional hearings and all of that type of stuff. If you're looking for disclosure or anything else that is UFO or alien related, just remember that's somebody else's soundbite. I recommend that you turn your focus inside, and amazing stuff will come to you if you just get quiet each day for a few minutes.
Yes, definitely. And what has been the most unexpected or poignant response you've received from a reader about how has affected them?
That's a question. So the feedback coming through from folks who are listening to the Audible, some of them have said, wow, you just identified that it's a American pilot after liftoff, because they're listening to the real cockpit recordings. And they'll write about that like, I just never heard it, although I've heard those before. I can now clearly hear it because of the Audible. So that's been a fun thing for people to realize, that it's all Asian voices on the MH370 flight during ground operations. And as soon as they take off, it's an American pilot for the rest of the flight. And that's a pretty major development that just came about.
If Haas were to start a movement, what would that movement look like and what would people be doing differently, Mr. MD?
I think they would be going inside versus looking out to news stations to figure out what their world is about, what their world is actually about. That they would be going inside to realize that there's an entire wealth of knowledge when you settle down a little bit and realize the power that you already have to kind of know everything you need to know. It's almost like practicing the art of not doing anything, and realizing everything will come if you can just settle down and not continue to look outside to spin yourself off on something that gets you away from you.
Mr. Amdi, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season. Abstract poetry in second season. My book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 fourth season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our fourth season. Science 101, Sex 101, and second season of my baby podcast, Law 101, Mental Health 101, and a Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. MD, looking back, is has a book you wrote for your former self, or is it a message you need to hear now guiding the person you were becoming?
I definitely think it's the latter, guiding the present that I'm becoming.
Interesting. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Andy. Can you please invite our listeners to support your best-selling and debut book?
Sure, they can go to mdselig.com and find the links. And thank you for having me.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Md Selig, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering hearts of serious will rise. So, Mr. Md, Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
More people, see you soon.